Did you know that when parents are asked what they would do if they had 1 extra hour every day, most parents say they would use it for sleep? Are you exhausted trying to balance kids, work, and play? Do you want more purpose and less monotony in your life? Do you get overly irritated, frustrated, and angry with your children? If you've answered yes to some of these questions, then I'm glad you're here. I know how busy you are, and I'm not here to take your time. I'm here to help you take it back. Close your windows, open your mind, and let's kick some ass. I'd like to welcome Alfie Kohn to the show today. Alfie writes about education and parenting. He has authored 12 books, and he speaks against competition and reward in schools, and is quite possibly one of the most outspoken critics of the education system's fixation on grades and test scores. So I'd love to welcome Alfie to the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be part of it.
Wonderful. So I'm going to dive right in here, Alfie. I know we're on a limited time schedule today, so we'll just jump right in. So I was curious after reading in some of your articles, and you speak a lot about how schools are ineffective in teaching our children. You believe school, grades, homework turn learning more into a chore than a joy for kids. So in your opinion, what have you found to be the alternatives?
Well, I've written a couple of books on that topic, as have many other people. It's hard to summarize in just a couple of sentences, but I will try. I think what helps kids to become engaged is to bring them in on the process of making decisions about what they're learning and how and why and with whom, rather than simply doing education to them, which is the traditional passive model. Second, I think learning becomes more engaging when kids feel part of a caring community, not when they're isolated from others, made to work on their own, or worse, set against each other in a contest, so each can succeed only if the others fail. Third, school can become more exciting and rewarding if kids are thinking deeply about questions that matter, rather than merely memorizing facts or practicing isolated skills. And one of the most effective ways to do that is for the curriculum to be organized around questions and problems and projects, rather than around lists of facts and skills and separate disciplines. So when it becomes an adventure in ideas, where kids together actively and interactively play a vital role in shaping what it is they're learning, then school becomes transformed into the kind of place where they want to be.
That's beautifully said, and that was something that I really found. I was really attracted to that when I was reading your articles, because I feel so oftentimes kids are kind of pushed into that model of learning facts, and they're not engaged in actually being creative. And I think that creativity has kind of moved out of schools in a lot of ways with art, music, and dance programs. What are your thoughts on ways that parents can get engaged and get these things back into schools?
By understanding the single greatest reason why the arts have been squeezed out, and that is because of the top-down, heavy-handed, corporate-style, test-driven approach to school reform that has squeezed the intellectual life, too, out of our schools. Every time parents want to know something about the test scores or treat test scores as useful information, they're helping to drive the arts out of the schools. And not just arts, but recess for little kids, exciting electives for older kids, the chance to participate in democratic class meetings, to learn out of the school in the community. All of those things are being sacrificed in a desperate push to raise scores on bad standardized tests. And because, music isn't going to be tested, there's less room for it. So we have to make it clear that we're interested in our kids receiving a well-rounded education, but more importantly, we as parents need to make it clear that standardized tests measure what matters least. And we have to be willing to keep our kids home during the weeks when they actually give the tests. Otherwise, we are helping to contribute to dismantling what is most meaningful about education.
That's powerful, Alfie. So in your mind, you believe that parents need to really take a serious look at this and take a real stand against it and say, enough is enough? I mean, you're saying, don't participate. Is that what you mean?
If a parent is concerned about the amount of time that is being spent on not only giving the tests, but preparing the kids to take the tests, and if parents are skeptical about whether a test score accurately captures the intellectual capabilities of their children, then they should seriously consider withholding their consent and cooperation. There has been a move to do that, a national opt-out movement, in fact, as well as some individual kids boycotting the tests and teachers boycotting the tests. But parents have the most powerful position to decide whether they want to continue to participate in this movement in the name of raising the bar and tougher standards and global competitiveness, which is the sort of corporate speak that turns our schools into glorified test prep centers. If parents together said, we won't be part of this, we want our schools back, then the politicians and business executives that have been pushing for this standards and testing model of school reform would have to reconsider.
That's amazing. I appreciate your thoughts on that. And for the average parent who's afraid to kind of stand up against the system and make that shift and make that change, where would you suggest, if they do want it, but they're just afraid to do it, where would you suggest they plug into? What are some resources they can use to gain the confidence and the courage and the strength to do what you're saying?
Well, there are individual movements in many states, grassroots movements of teachers and parents to try to push back. There's also a couple of websites I'd suggest. My own website, alfiekohn.org, has a standards and testing section with a lot of resources on it. There's one called unitedoptout.com. There's also a very good organization based in the Boston area, a national group called Fair Test. They have a website, fairtest.org. Those might be good places to start.
Outstanding, Alfie. I know we don't have a ton of time left, so just want to ask you a couple of final questions. How do you think that parents, outside of test scores, what can we do as parents to get united and get into schools and start to reshape them into the kind of learning centers that you're talking about? I know that Montessori does a great job with that sort of thing. How can we take those models into the public school system?
I think there's at least two questions buried there. One is, what is it that we would be recommending and pushing, and how do we learn more so that we're on the right side and doing something that really is worthy of our kids? And then the second is the political nitty-gritty of how you get involved to try to advocate for that stuff. So my writings, including lots and lots of articles freely available on my website, try to address the first question. What does a great classroom, what does a great school look like? And that includes, what are we moving beyond? Why do we need to question the traditional aspects of schooling that get in the way of good learning? Grades, tests, homework, lectures, worksheets, top-down teacher-directed classrooms, competition, rewards and punishments, and so on. And I've written at length on each of those topics, drawing from the research and practice of many other folks who've come before me. And then the second question is, if there's one of those topics or something else related that is of special interest to a given parent, how you make your voice heard will depend on the specific situation of your child's teacher and school. In most cases, it makes sense to try to connect with other parents, to organize and mobilize, which is the sort of thing that you do at birthday parties, at the hairdresser, at dinner parties and so on, to reach out to other parents and say, let's ask the bigger question here. Not, is my kid getting A's, but how are all our kids losing interest in learning because they're given standard grades? How can we learn more about schools that don't give grades and begin together to put pressure on the schools to join that movement of alternative assessment? The same thing goes for homework. Not, can we bring down the number of minutes, but why should kids have to work a second shift after spending all day in school when the research consistently fails to find any benefit of homework, especially at the elementary school level? Again, if 10 parents rather than one walks in and says, our children are crying, they're frustrated, they're exhausted, they're less excited about reading because you send home these worksheets when there's zero benefit according to the best available data. How are we going to change this together? You pick the item that you feel is most important, and then you make change about for our kids with other parents, not just for your kid alone.
I like how you said it starts at the birthday parties and at the hairdresser and these places where we're communicating already. Why not really get keyed in on what it is that our kids are going through, and how can we get together to do that? So any other resources that you could point out as far as like ways that parents can form these these committees and go from the birthday party to a sit down meeting? Like, you know what I'm saying?
There's now social media available for doing this. People set up Facebook pages, questioning homework at the John Smith Elementary School. People can do this on Twitter, and we can do this the old-fashioned way with phone trees and coffees and dinners in living rooms. There's lots of ways to reach out to other parents, as long as you begin by realizing you're not the only one who has a question, a problem with the status quo. But the important thing is to take a step back and ask the root questions. Parents sit around playgrounds and talk about, their kids' schools all the time, but too often I think they're focused on the wrong thing. Is it challenging enough for my special kid? Reading when she was 4. Is it rigorous enough? As opposed to, why are we just looking at difficulty level? Or is it meaningful? How much say do the kids have about what they're reading? And again, as I said before, not just to fine-tune the details of implementation of issues like grades and tests and homework and so on, but to ask the underlying question of why would we be doing these things at all? And if you're able to visit other schools and teachers and connect with parents who are lucky enough to go to schools that are more progressive, more child-centered, more based on thinking than memorizing forgettable facts, then be sure to cite these other resources to show what I know, and not everybody knows, that these kind of alternatives aren't just utopian, that would be nice in an ideal world possibilities, but they in fact are being used in many places, and they work a lot better.
That's beautiful, Alfie. Thank you so much for that. And it sounds to me like you're saying, and this is something that I believe, that all of our kids have unique strengths, talents, gifts, purpose. So my last question would be, how do we start to transform schools so we're teaching to the kid directly based on their unique talents, as opposed to a generalized, standardized, corporate, top-down approach?
Well, that's much too much to answer in a few sentences. You're talking about radically reshaping curriculum and pedagogy, what's called differentiating the curriculum. And that's a question where some of the best teachers have already shown how it can be done. But they have, to come back now full circle to where I started, that becomes harder to do if we accept specific prescriptive standards, all fourth graders will have to learn rocks and minerals, um, uh, or how to read a Venn diagram or whatever it is, and then be tested on it. That standards and testing model is, by definition, one size fits all. So if we're not pushing back against the newest move, which is the nationalized core standards, if we're not pushing back against long lists of skills and sub-skills and factual knowledge that every kid in the state or the country is supposed to master in a lockstep schedule with tests to enforce that top-down approach. If we're not pushing back against that, we are by definition enabling a system that will not and cannot respond to the needs of our individual children. That's why we have to become politically involved. And it also means that in order to press for the developments and practices that make the most sense, we have to be willing to push against and rebel against the things that impede that journey.
Alfie, thank you so much for sharing that powerful message with parents, because I think all too often we are more willing to go along with the status quo because it's easier and it just seems like everybody else is doing it. So what you're doing and standing up for our kids and what they need from us and from society is just huge. So thank you so much for what you're doing personally. Thank you for doing the show today. It is truly moving to talk to you. And if you want to just real quick, let us know, exactly how we can find you, what products you offer, if you do speaking engagements, how people can connect with you. And
my website has information about my books. It has 150 articles. It shows 2 DVDs that I've done, and lots of resources and references to others. It's Alfie Kohn, AlfieKohn.org.
Beautiful, Alfie. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll let you get back to your family, and but it's certainly meaningful to me and hopefully my listeners. Thank you so much, Alfie.
You bet. Thanks for your interest.